So everyone talks about full-size routers like they're an essential tool. But I've always thought that for most casual DIY and carpentry, these things are really a bit overkill. Full-size routers are the sort of tool that beginners often won't need to purchase for years or possibly ever. If you're new to carpentry and DIY, there's a smaller, more portable version of this tool on the market, and it may be the only rotary shaper you ever need. So that's what I'm talking about today on The Honest Carpenter Show. So I won't contest that full-size routers are very powerful, versatile tools. They play a major role in everything from cabinet making to high-end joinery, and every serious woodworker should really have one. But over the years, making custom projects for my clients and myself, I really didn't use full-size routers that much. In fact, I can remember entire seasons when I didn't pick up my 12-amp Bosch at all. Most beginner to intermediate projects just don't require full-size routers. And that's because so many projects these days involve two things: pre-milled lumber and simple joinery. Modern building materials have become pretty slick. Our 2x4s have coped edges, our ply panels are perfectly square and strong, and our trim lumber is already well surfaced, light, and easy to work with. Also, the joinery techniques that we use for most projects are pretty easy to achieve. A lot of stuff gets glued and butt jointed, possibly even cleated. We tend to cover up our fasteners with just wood filler and paint, and pocket screws can turn your basic drill into a joinery machine for just $50. So the days of dovetailing everything for strength just seem to be long gone. Now, I'll amend that by saying if you really want to get into complex joinery, then by all means, go for it. The love of true woodworking is thriving today, and strong half-inch routers have made even casual users into joinery wizards thanks to outrageously well-crafted router bits. But I've found that most people I talk to don't really need to go into that much detail. They just want to build functional stuff that looks nice and improves their lives. And to do that, a full-size router simply is not necessary. Most casual users only need a router to do two things: dress edges and cut grooves. And you can accomplish both those things, plus much more, with this helpful tool, the palm router. The palm router is just a smaller version of a full-size router. It has the same basic components: a motor, a detachable base, and a collet. And when you load router bits into the collet, the tool will spin them, thus creating a cutting edge. So for many types of profile cuts, palm routers are not only much more convenient, they're also just way easier to use. And here are the reasons why. For starters, they're much smaller and lighter. Full-size routers are bulky and heavy. They often weigh up around 10 pounds. That's a lot of motor weight pulling the tool downwards. So they can be difficult for new users to balance, and they have to be handled carefully with both hands. But palm routers are half that weight or less, usually just 3 to 5 pounds, and they're very ergonomic. They fit comfortably in one hand and typically come with molded grips, so they're easier to carry, easier to handle, and their narrower base doesn't create a lot of friction on the board. On top of that, their operation is very intuitive and easy. To use them, you generally just start them up with the paddle switch, set them on your board edge with the bit spinning free, and then gently guide them into the edge with the fingers of your free hand on the base plate for support. As you make a pass with them, palm routers just seem to travel much more smoothly. I think the lack of motor weight pressing them down lets them glide a little better. So it's easy to follow an edge with a guide bearing bit, or easy to travel through the field of the board with groove cutting bits. And overall, they're much more powerful than they look or feel. Palm routers can often achieve a range of speeds, from 10,000 to 35,000 RPMs, with many different models featuring a variable speed dial for working with different materials and bits. And they tend to have at least 6 amps of power, or sometimes up to 9, which is a heck of a strong motor for such a small tool. As long as your bits are relatively clean and sharp, palm routers will cut most materials just as well as their larger counterparts. They'll go right through softwoods, MDF, and most plywoods without a fuss. You may have to slow down a bit for hardwoods and possibly make shallower passes. But that brings us to another one of my favorite things about these tools: they adjust very quickly. Many palm routers are fixed base. They don't plunge. But the body clamp is extremely easy to flip, and you can just slide the housing in tiny increments, controlling the two parts with a little pressure from your hands. And you can make pretty fine adjustments this way. So I've always found it easy to make multi-step passes, just gradually increasing my depth so the tool doesn't get overwhelmed. This has always been an annoyance with full-size routers for me, especially with fixed base. The clamps are stiff, and the weight of the tool, plus the snug fit of the housing, make them hard to adjust by hand. Yes, plunge routers cut out some of those steps, and they're nice to use, but they tend to be more expensive overall, not everybody has them, and plunge springs can rust or degrade. So they're not always the answer. In my journeys as a carpenter, if I needed to produce a little roundover on some shelving, or possibly even an ogee or chamfer just for looks, this was the tool that I reached for. Way more effective than a full-size router or a sander for putting light, uniform profiles on the edge of a board. One pass is often all it takes, and that pass is really smooth. It doesn't require a lot of setup or thought. You just grab the tool, make your cut, then put it back on the shelf. And of course, palm routers are often cheaper than full-size routers. My Bosch Colt is a very popular pro model, so it's kind of expensive. But there are a lot of highly rated off-brands for palm routers, some of which even come with starter bits and attachments, and you can get that all for under $70. This is one of the greatest tools to save money on because you may not have to use it every day. It's not a circular saw or a table saw. Those are your workhorse tools. This is an outlier, something you really only bring in to help finish a project. So I always recommend deal hunting for palm routers and taking whatever looks good in your budget. Now, those are all the benefits of the tool, but I always like to point out a few weaknesses or limitations as well. So here it goes. The first is that you can't use every router bit on this tool. And that has to do with the fact that palm routers are only meant to hold a 1/4 inch collet. Router bits typically come in two shank sizes, 1/4 inch and 1/2 inch. This is the diameter of the shaft behind the cutter head. In other words, the part that gets gripped by the tool. Larger bits tend to come with 1/2 inch shanks because this thickness is necessary to counteract the rotational stress of increased resistance. Bits that size are not meant for palm routers. Those bits are too big and the tool is too underpowered to handle them. And that's why their collets aren't even equipped to receive them. 1/4 inch bits, on the other hand, tend to be smaller with simpler head profiles. Think cove bits, chamfer bits, OGs, and template and pattern bits. Those are perfect for palm routers because they aren't removing too much material on a single pass. And if you're going to do a lot of perimeter shaping with them, you really want a tool that travels around the board easily and isn't cumbersome. It doesn't get much easier than this. Palm routers are just so light and so easy to balance and manipulate. The only other caveat I'll tell you to keep in mind is that palm routers do bring your fingers closer to the bit. This has always seemed a little crazy to me, but the bases are meant to be lightly touched or gripped. They even have little dugouts for your fingers. But the bases themselves are only a few inches wide, so naturally your fingers may be pretty close to the spinning bit. It can be pretty unnerving at first, and I always recommend using them with caution this way. But you do get used to it pretty quickly and learn how to hold them in a particular way for comfort and safety. Plus, palm routers can be used one-handed if need be, and there are base plate add-ons out there that can widen your control points. So you can look into those if you're uncomfortable with the stock grip. And of course, if you're really new to power tools and you want to learn to use routers and other tools quickly, remember that I'm offering my online course these days, Power Tools Explained. In quick 10-minute videos, I take you through the 20 most important power tools for carpenters and DIYers. I explain how they work, how to use them safely, and I provide a lot of great pro tips along the way. That's available right now at thehonestcarpenter.com, along with some cool freebies. So be sure to check out Power Tools Explained at thehonestcarpenter.com today. But palm routers are just a game-changing tool that have made router functionality so much more convenient. Before you buy a full-size router, have a look at these smaller, more affordable models. I'll link some below down in the description, as well as some good bits. Feel free to shop those links, and I hope you'll consider subscribing to the channel. You can just click the button right below this screen. That's it for this week. I'm Ethan James with thehonestcarpenter.com. I'll see you next time.